I was given a week to come up with a talk this time. And normally it takes me months to do that. And what normally happens is about 3 weeks before the talk, something seems to start bubbling up. But that wasn't the case this time. So the last time Dokai gave a talk, he talked from Pema Chodron's book, When Things Fall Apart. So I was already returning to that book because remembering how good that book is and how important it was getting me through some difficult times. So Saturday morning, I sat down with some coffee and a notepad, and I thought I had a theme, and then I read another chapter and kind of blew that theme out of the water. So what I'm going to do today mostly is read from Pema Chodron's book. And I like Pema Chodron because she's very direct, very grounded, very realistic, very practical. And I think she aligns closely with what we know of Zen practice. So I started with this chapter 10, which the 3 marks of existence. So I was told a long time ago, every Dharma talk should touch on the 3 marks of existence. So we should all know the 3 marks of existence: impermanence, suffering, and no self. So this is how this chapter begins. There are 3 truths traditionally called 3 marks of existence: impermanence, suffering, and egolessness. Even though they accurately describe the rock-bottom qualities of our existence, these words sound threatening. It's easy to get the idea that there is something wrong with impermanence, suffering, and egolessness, which is like thinking that there's something wrong with our fundamental situation. But there's nothing wrong with impermanence, suffering, and egolessness. So that's kind of just the way things are. The reason that Buddhism is so different from a lot of religious practices is because it permeates our daily life. Impermanence and suffering permeates our daily life. Egolessness, not so much, but maybe a touch now and then. So I think this is why so many books and so many talks are able to be written, is because this Buddhist practice just permeates our everyday life. So in this chapter, Pema Chodron suggests, as we go through our everyday life and we notice impermanence, we label it as impermanence. And we go through our daily life and we notice suffering, we say suffering. And even if we come across occasionally, when we come into a period of actual don't know and egolessness, we kind of label that as egolessness. I don't especially like, this is kind of mindfulness practice, but I don't like this. I'm kind of biased against labeling things like that because it kind of dismisses them. It's like, oh, that's impermanence. I got a handle on impermanence. Yep, I recognize it, and I'm on top of it. But actually, impermanence, that's just scratching the surface. The whole idea of Buddhist practice is not to scratch the surface. And there's a quote from another teacher that I was going to bring in, but I haven't. Unlike worldly accomplishments, genuine transformative practice and experience rarely comes from reason or knowledge. So this is what kind of Zen practice is about. It's kind of beyond reason, beyond knowledge. But this is what we talk about. This is the way we're introduced to ideas of impermanence, suffering, and egolessness. But those ideas have to be penetrated to the point where they're actually abandoned at some point. This is kind of this is kind of the paradox of Buddhist practice in some ways, that it's based on experience. It's based on kind of penetrating things. So that takes me to another chapter called Chapter 18, which has the fun title of Secret Oral Instruction. This is like these, we're finally going to get to the root of things. So starting somewhere in the first paragraph, we might have just read something or heard some teachings that turned our usual way of seeing things upside down. We feel that we've just reconnected with the truth that we've always known, and that if we could just learn more about it, our life would be delightful and rich. We tell our friends of our longing to shed the huge burden we feel we've always carried. This is something that comes up. We feel, what are we being asked? What do we want to be liberated from? We want to be liberated from this huge burden we feel we've always carried. We suddenly are excited and feel it's possible. We tell our friend of our inspiration, how it opens up our life. So then she goes on. You may have noticed, however, that there is frequently an irritating, if not depressing, discrepancy between our ideas and good intentions and how we act when we are confronted with the nitty-gritty details of real-life situations. One afternoon, I was riding a bus in San Francisco, reading a very touching article on human suffering and helping others. The idea of being generous and extending myself to those in need became so poignant that I started to cry. People were looking at me as the tears ran down my cheeks. I felt a great tenderness toward everyone, and a commitment to benefit others arose in me. As soon as I got home, feeling pretty exhausted after working all day, the phone rang, and it was someone asking if I could please help her out by taking her position as a meditation leader that night. I said, "No, sorry, I need to rest," and hung up. This is the nitty-gritty truth of things. This is how we want to do things, and then the truth of the situation comes up. It's not a matter of a right choice or a wrong choice, but simply that we are often presented with a dilemma about bringing together the inspiration of the teachings with what they meant to us on the spot. There is a perplexing tension between our aspirations and the reality of feeling tired, hungry, stressed out, afraid, bored, angry, or whatever we experience in any given moment of our life. And she tells the story of Naropa, who basically thought he understood the words of Buddhist scholars. And then a woman asks him if he understood the meaning, and that realized he was just kind of had a big attack of, I'd say, imposter syndrome. He knew that he didn't really know. So he went and tried to find out. So how do we reconcile that frustration and humiliation with her longing to be open and compassionate and not to harm ourselves or others? How do we mix our intention to be alert and gentle in meditation with the reality that we sit down and immediately fall asleep? What about when we sit down and spend the entire time thinking about how we crave someone or something we saw on the way to the meditation hall? Or we sit down and squirm the whole morning because our knees hurt and our back hurts and we're bored and fed up. Instead of calm, wakeful, and egoless, we find ourselves getting more edgy, irritable, and solid. And this next sentence is kind of the whole focus of Pema Chodron's practice. This is an extreme interesting place to find oneself. For the practitioner, this is an exceedingly important place. When Naropa, seeking the meaning behind the words, set out to find a teacher, he continually found himself in this position of being squeezed. Intellectually, he knew all about compassion, but when he came upon a filthy, lice-infested dog, he looked away. In the same vein, he knew all about non-attachment and non-judging, but when his teacher asked him to do something he disapproved of, he refused. This is how we go about. We think we know, we're intellectually, we all understand impermanence. Things come, things go, nothing lasts. We understand suffering. Suffering is pretty easy to understand, but have we really understood the meaning of impermanence? Have we really understood the meaning of suffering? So this is when we get in this kind of squeeze between our intellectual understanding and our lack of manifestation of our understanding. That's an important place, according to Pema Chodron. We continually find ourselves in that squeeze. It's a place where we look for alternatives to just being there. It's an uncomfortable, embarrassing place, and it's often the place where people like ourselves give up. We liked meditation and the teachings when we felt inspired and in touch with ourselves and on the right path. But what about when it begins to feel like a burden, like we made the wrong choice and it's not living up to our expectations at all? The people we are, this is an interesting sentence to me. The people we are meeting are not all that sane. Have you ever felt that with the Zen people? A friend of mine says, whenever someone new comes in, I have to understand that they probably have some issues. The people we are meeting are not all that sane. In fact, they seem pretty confused. The way the place is run is not up to par. Even the teacher is questionable. The place of the squeeze is the very point in our meditation and in our lives where we can really learn something. The point where we are not able to take it or leave it, where we are caught between a rock and a hard place, caught with both the upliftedness of our ideas and the rawness of what's happening in front of our eyes. This is indeed a very fruitful place. Katagiri Roshi often mentioned not being able to move an inch, just that being stuck, not being able to move an inch, not knowing what to do. And this is when we talk about not knowing. We want to have this idea, we want to have this manifestation of not knowing. But sometimes when it really works, not knowing works on you. You don't work on not knowing. Not knowing, you find yourself in a position of not knowing what to do. When we feel squeezed, there's a tendency for mind to become small. We feel miserable, like a victim, like a pathetic, hopeless case. So believe it or not, at that moment of hassle or bewilderment or embarrassment, our minds could become bigger. Instead of taking what's occurred as a statement of personal weakness or someone else's power, instead of feeling we are stupid or someone else is unkind, we could drop all our complaints about ourselves and others. We could be there feeling off guard, not knowing what to do, just hanging out there with the raw and tender energy of the moment. This is the place where we begin to learn the meaning behind the concepts and the words. We're so used to running from discomfort, and we're so predictable. If we don't like it, we strike out at someone or beat up on ourselves. We want to have security and certainty of some kind when actually we have no ground to stand on at all. This is a word, groundlessness comes up in her teaching a lot. We are standing on ground that has no ground. The next time that there's no ground to stand on, don't consider it an obstacle. Consider it a remarkable stroke of luck. We have no ground to stand on, and at the same time, it could soften and inspire us. Finally, after all these years, we could truly grow up. This is kind of, it took me a long time to even begin to understand the concept of growing up. But this is kind of, even my friend in California who's kind of knows Buddhist concepts, he understands that Buddhism is a lot about responsibility, taking responsibility for yourself, taking responsibility for your actions, taking responsibility for the whole world in a way. and basically growing up. We are given changes all the time. We can either cling to security or we can let ourselves feel exposed if we had just been born, as if we had just popped out into the brightness of life and we're completely naked. If you ever have truly powerful experience of impermanence with some kind of loss or some kind of shock to the system, you'll notice that things are very fresh, that you notice that things are very poignant and fragile. And it's like a new world when you're shocked into the understanding of impermanence, that you see how fragile things actually are. We don't like to stay there for very long. And we don't like, it's a little uncomfortable, but it's really quite beautiful how poignant and fragile life, everything around us is. It's like your eyes are opened in a way. Maybe that sounds too uncomfortable or frightening, but on the other hand, it's our chance to realize this mundane world is all there is, and we could see it with new eyes and at long last wake up from our ancient sleep of preconceptions. So, how do we relate to that squeeze? Somehow, someone finally needs to encourage us to be inquisitive about this unknown territory and about the unanswerable questions of what's going to happen next. This idea of being inquisitive, being, what's this other person say? Having deep interest, being curious, very deeply curious about what is going on. Stephen Batchelor and his wife spent years in a Korean Zen monastery, just working on the phrase, what is this? What is this? The state of nowness is available in that moment of squeeze. In that awkward, ambiguous moment is our own wisdom mind. Right there in the uncertainty of everyday chaos is our own wisdom mind. It's quite daring, and maybe we feel we aren't up to it, but that's the point. Right there in that inadequate, restless feeling is our wisdom mind. We can simply experiment. There's absolutely nothing to lose. We could experiment with not getting tossed around by right and wrong, and with the learning to relax with groundlessness. When I was a child, this is Pema speaking, of course. When I was a child, I had a picture book called Lives of the Saints. It was filled with stories of men and women who had never had an angry or mean thought and had never hurt a fly. I found the book totally useless as a guide for how we humans were supposed to live a good life. For me, the life of Milarepa is a lot more instructive. Over the years, as I read and reread Milarepa's story, I find myself getting advice for where I am stuck and can't seem to move forward. To begin with, Milarepa was a murderer, and like most of us, we blow it. When we blow it, we wanted to atone for his errors. And like most of us in the process of seeking liberation, he frequently fell flat on his face. He lied and stole to get what he wanted. He got so depressed he was suicidal, and he experienced nostalgia for the good old days. Like most of us, he had one person in his life who continually tested him and blew his saintly cover. Even when almost everyone regarded him as one of Tibet's most holy men, his vindictive old aunt continued to beat him with sticks and call him names. And he continued to have to figure out what to do with that kind of humiliating squeeze. One can be grateful that a long lineage of teacher has worked with holding their seats with the big squeeze. They were tested and failed and still kept exploring how to just stay there, not seeking solid ground. They trained again and again throughout their lives not to give up on themselves, not to run away when the bottom fell out of their concepts and their noble ideals. From their own experience, they have passed along to us the encouragement not to jump over the big squeeze, but to look at it just as it is, not just out of the corner of our eye. They showed us how to experience it fully, not as good or bad, but simply as unconditioned and ordinary. So that's a chapter worth rereading. The same themes are touched on in other chapters. This is from chapter 3. This very moment is the perfect teacher. The spiritual journey involves going beyond hope and fear, stepping into the unknown territory, continually moving forward. The most important aspect of being on the spiritual path may be to just keep moving. Again, Katagiri Roshi used to say that a lot. Just keep going, keep going. Usually when we reach our limit, this is another metaphor for the squeeze. When we reach our limit, we feel exactly, well, we tend to freeze in terror. Our bodies freeze, and so do our minds. How do we work with our minds when we meet our match? Another way of saying the same thing. Rather than indulge or reject our experience, we can somehow let the energy of the emotion, the quality of what we're feeling, pierce us to the heart. This is easier said than done, but it's a noble way to live. It's definitely the path of compassion, the path of cultivating human bravery and kind-heartedness. In the teachings of Buddhism, we hear about egolessness. It sounds difficult to grasp. It's this idea of impermanence. We can grasp that intellectually. The idea of suffering, it's pretty easy to grasp intellectually. The idea of no mind or egolessness is difficult to grasp because we're using words and approaching the idea through the mind, and the mind doesn't want to know about egolessness. I'm told sometimes I've heard this idea of if you could, it's like trying to touch your fingertip with your fingertip. You can't touch your fingertip with your fingertip. You can't grasp egolessness with your mind. It's not going to want to go there. It sounds difficult to grasp. What are they talking about anyway? When the teachings are about neurosis, however, we feel right at home. That's something we really understand. But egolessness, when we reach our limit, if we aspire to know that place fully, which is to say that we aspire to neither indulge nor repress, a hardness in us will dissolve. We will be softened by the sheer force of whatever energy arises. The energy of anger, the energy of disappointment, the energy of fear. When it's not solidified in one direction or another, that very energy pierces us to the heart and it opens us. That is the discovery of egolessness. It is when all our usual schemes fall apart. Reaching our limit is like finding a doorway to sanity and the unconditioned goodness of humanity, rather than meeting an obstacle or a punishment. So this is not something that's easy to come across. But like I said, sometimes life will push you into that situation, give you a shock that all your fabrications, all the things you've put together to deal with your strategies, your patterns don't really work anymore. But fortunately, the safest and most nurturing place to begin working this way is during formal meditation. On the cushion, we begin to get the hang of not indulging or repressing, and of what it feels like to let the energy just be there. This is why it's so good to meditate every single day and continue to make friends with our hopes and fears again and again. This sows the seeds that enables us to be more awake in the middle of everyday chaos. It's a gradual awakening, and it's cumulative, but that's actually what happens. We don't sit in meditation to become good meditators. We sit in meditation so that we will be more awake in our lives. We don't sit in meditation to become good meditators. We sit in meditation so that we'll become more awake in our lives. The first thing that happens in meditation is that we start to see what's happening. Even though we still run away and we still indulge, we see what we're doing clearly. One would think that our seeing it clearly would immediately make it just disappear, but it doesn't. So for quite a long time, we just see it clearly. To the degree that we're willing to see our indulging and our repressing clearly, they begin to wear themselves out. Wearing out is not exactly the same as going away. Instead, a wider, more generous, more enlightened perspective arises. I really appreciate this idea of wearing things out because in my experience, nothing much has gone away, but some things have worn out their welcome. Some things wear out. There's a little bit, this practice of relinquishment, of coming back from thought, back to your focus, back to your breath, if that's your focus. And it's one of the things I was going to bring up is, a lot of what we talk about in dealing with meditation is thoughts come up, and then we let go of that thought and come back. We don't want to go off on a story. We don't want to take off on a narrative, but it's easy to take off on a narrative. But one of the teachers that I was reading talks also about tone feeling, this mental factors, tone feeling. Why do we have the thoughts that we have? It's because of deeper down, there's a tone feeling. We have this kind of, let's say, Pema Chodron talks about restlessness. If we have this restlessness, that's a tone feeling. This restlessness is a tone feeling. And what do we do when we're restless? We don't want to deal with the restless. We want a distraction. This is a big deal these days because people spend hours and hours on phones scrolling through one dopamine hit after another, which has been manufactured to do that because people know we're restless and they build up restlessness and it creates even more restlessness. But this restlessness is a tone feeling. I have a tone feeling of restlessness. I have a tone feeling of impatience. I have a tone feeling of wanting to get on with things. I also have a tone feeling of kind of a paranoia. My mom really impressed upon me the ideal of worry. So if things can go bad, I have a tone feeling of deep down. So I manifest thoughts that what could go wrong? What can go wrong? So I'm very careful about some things because of that, which is a good thing. But it's what I'm trying to get to is we spend a lot of time thinking about thoughts, talking about thoughts, but there's something below thoughts, this tone feeling, these patterns of just how we feel about things. Wearing out is not exactly the same as going away. Instead, a wider, more generous, more enlightened perspective arises. How we stay in the middle between indulging and repressing is by acknowledging whatever arises without judgment, letting the thoughts simply dissolve, and then going back to the openness of this very moment. That's what we're actually doing in meditation. Up come all these thoughts, but rather than squelch them or obsess with them, we acknowledge them and let them go. Then we come back to just being here. After a while, that's how we relate to hope and fear in our daily lives. Out of nowhere, we stop struggling and relax. We stop talking to ourselves and come back to the freshness of the present moment. This is something that evolves gradually, patiently, over time. I don't think when people come to Zen practice, they realize how much time this is going to take. This takes a long time. It's only been the last few years that I've given up wanting anything special to happen and just be present with whatever's there. That's a huge achievement, but it's not an achievement at all. It's something that should have been there from the very beginning. But it's something that people come to Zen practice for liberation, not realizing this is a lot of work. This is hard, hard work, but it's wonderful work. It really does open up your life. How long does this process take? I would say it takes the rest of our lives. Katagiri Roshi went one further. He would say, life after life, life after life. You don't have to believe in life after life, but having that attitude of life after life, that's the attitude we're talking about here. Basically, we're continually opening further, learning more, connecting further with the depths of human suffering and human wisdom, coming to know both. There's always more to learn. We're not just complacent old fogies who've given up and aren't challenged by anything anymore. At the most surprising times, we'll still meet ferocious, well, she says dogs because of an earlier example, but we'll meet difficult situations where we don't expect them. And I really like this next paragraph. We might think as we become more open that it's going to take bigger catastrophes for us to reach our limit. The interesting thing is that as we open more and more, it's the big ones that immediately wake us up and the little things that catch us off guard. However, no matter what the size, color, or shape, the point is still to lean toward the discomfort of life and see it clearly rather than protect yourself from it. So when I went through my big, when I lost Sandy died, I went through this big catastrophe of grief. And I read something from Reb Anderson that when people go through these big, big things like that, they say, oh, I've been preparing all my life for this. I know what to do. Well, okay, then do that. But yeah, you're still tripped up by these little things. Someone on the street comes up and asks you for money, and it's like how many things run through your brain at that point. So like you see people on the street asking for money. You see, difficult situations with people you work with. And it's like, well, what do I do? It's these little things that really can trip you up. In practicing meditation, we're not trying to live up to some kind of ideal, quite the opposite. We're just being with our experience, whatever it is. If our experience is that sometimes we have some kind of perspective and sometimes we have none, then that's our experience. If sometimes we can approach what scares us and sometimes we absolutely can't, then that's our experience. This very moment is the perfect teacher, and it's always with us, is really a most profound instruction. Just seeing what's going on, that the teaching is right there. We can be with what's happening and not dissociate. So I'm going to read that again because I think it's very important, because sometimes we have the idea from certain teachers that we should be a certain way. And then we lead to what's called spiritual bypassing. And we try to be somebody that we want to be, but we're not quite there yet. And that leads to a lot of trouble. In practicing meditation, we're not trying to live up to some kind of ideal. Quite the opposite. We're just being with our experience, whatever it is. If our experience is that sometimes we have some kind of perspective and sometimes we have none, then that's our experience. If sometimes we can approach what scares us And sometimes we absolutely can't, then that's our experience. This very moment is the perfect teacher, and it's always with us. It's really a most profound instruction. Just seeing what's going on, that's the teaching right there. We can be with what's happening and not dissociate. Awakeness is found in our pleasure and our pain, our confusion and our wisdom, available in each moment of our weird, unfathomable, ordinary, everyday lives. So I think it comes across why I like Pema Chodron so much. This, I don't know, it's brilliant. So I can stop there. That's a pretty good place to stop. I welcome your everyday, ordinary comments or questions. John.
Ryushin, what do you think she means by disassociation? You hear that word a lot, and I'd like to hear from a, so to speak, a Buddhist perspective of what's your thoughts about what that means?
So one time, I took this brilliant class from Dr. Roger Mosvik at McAllister, and I went and I thought about what I wanted to write for a week, and then I started writing, and I came down with a migraine headache. So I have the blind spots when I'm typing. Can't even see what I'm typing, right? And so I went and I sat on my girlfriend's bed and I tried to dissociate from the pain. That's what comes up to me when I think of dissociating. You just try to go someplace else. You try to go someplace else. When I was going through a lot of the stuff with Sandy, I would sometimes go to a happy place. There's a place on the Chetco River in southern Oregon that there was a single wide trailer on 40 acres of land that was for sale for like $120,000. And it was like on a cliff, like 300 feet above the Chetco River. And this single wide trailer had no heat. They were wood heat. It had solar panels for electricity. Sometimes I would go think, it'd be nice to be in that single wide trailer on the Chetco River in southern Oregon, just to get through the next few minutes. So I think that's what dissociating is, but it's useful sometimes. I got a very good grade on that paper. It was one of my best papers. Hi, Kim.
Hey, Ryushin. Thank you very much. Very nice collection of thoughts. So we're just supposed to be where we are and see what it looks like.
It's a good place to start it.
Anyway, thank you for your effort. And good to see you.
Good to see you, Kim.
Also, Ryushin, what was the title of the book that you read from?
It's called When Things Fall Apart, Hard Advice for Difficult Times. It's her first book. Well, she's got a lot of books. This was from quite a while ago. This was like 1997. She's got a new book now called Welcoming the Unwelcome, which sounds like the same theme. But she hasn't had it. I immediately ordered that book thinking I would use that, but I got so taken with these little talks. I like these talks because they're short, they're to the point, and then they can just hit you and you can just, they have an effect on you and you can work with them. There's none of this, not a lot of abstract stuff. So there is something that I kind of wanted from the original idea of my talk from this Chan teacher in Tallahassee, Florida, whose name is Guigu. I can't pronounce it properly, but he talks about your living room. Your mind is your living room. So first of all, there's this space. There's this space in your living room. And when Sandy and I first had a house, we didn't have a lot of furniture, so there was a lot of space. So taking a long time to grow up, I had my road racing set up in the living room and dining room. But my parents came and they were just aghast that we didn't have any furniture. So then the next couple of times they showed up, they started bringing furniture. So over there's a square table with clawfoot legs from my grandmother's, and then they brought eight library chairs to put around a table. And then Sandy got her grandparents, I think her grandparents on her mother's side, their furniture reupholstered at the St. Cloud Reformatory when they did stuff like that. So that's my furniture. So, and this piano that's in front of me is Uncle Buddy's piano. Uncle Buddy was a half brother of Sandy's father, who went to California and was in Hollywood musicals in the 30s and 40s. And he died of a ruptured appendix. And somehow this piano got back from California and was in Sandy's parents' basement. And I said, you're not using it, and I could use it. And so this is Uncle Buddy's. So there's all this karma. There's all these associations. There's all this connections. This is my mind as well. I have all this karma. I have all these associations, but there's also this space. There's this space. There's this emptiness. There's this space. So they coexist. I think that's a brilliant extended metaphor.